everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, A Founder's Perspective Leading Through Challenging Times, featuring Kevin Dutt, Sabrina Horn, and Rachel Geicke. My name is Marianne McChesney from the Boston University Alumni Relations Office, and this webinar is presented by the BU Alumni Association. Thank you all for joining us today. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our global alumni audience that includes representation from more than 20 states and 7 countries, including Maine, Massachusetts, New York, and Florida, to Texas, Wyoming, Nevada, California, and Hawaii here in the US, as well as China, Greece, Mexico, Malaysia, and Trinidad internationally. It is a great pleasure to have you here, and we hope you enjoy the discussion. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping notes. Today's presentation is being recorded and will soon be available for on-demand viewing in the Alumni Association website. We will send you a direct link to that recording shortly after the program has ended. Also, our panelists are looking forward to answering your questions toward the end of the discussion. However, please feel free to submit your questions at any time using the Q&A box that you'll find in the Zoom toolbar. It is now time to introduce our featured guests, a talented group of founders and leaders of successful business ventures. Kevin Dutt is President and Chief Operating Officer of Legit Fish, a seafood supply chain tracking and verification company. Kevin is a Boston University graduate with a master's degree in business administration from the Questrom School of Business. He also has his mechanical engineering degree from Princeton. Kevin is a tech entrepreneur who has successfully launched several ventures. Prior to Legit Fish, he led the operations and product development in the successful launch of Big Belly, the solar-powered trash compacting bins you see on city streets, and he founded and oversaw Rainbank, a smart stormwater management technology company, and can speak to the management of major companies from his experience at Bayer, AMP, and International Paper. Sabrina Horn earned a master's degree in public relations from BU's College of Communications to complement her Bachelor of Arts degree in American Studies from Hobart and William Smith Colleges. Sabrina is an award-winning CEO, C-suite advisor, communications expert, speaker, and author. She was one of very few female CEOs in Silicon Valley in the early 90s, and her firm became one of the most iconic enduring firms in the tech world, winning accolades for Best US Employer and Best Tech Agency. She sold her firm in 2015, is now CEO of Horn Strategy, focused on helping entrepreneurs and CEOs navigate the early stages of their businesses. In addition, Sabrina has a new book coming out called Make It, Don't Fake It, Leading with Authenticity for Real Business Success. In the book, she shows how the application of authentic leadership eliminates the need for the shortcuts that corrupt business relationships and sabotage success. Some insights I'm sure she'll share with you today. Rachel Geicke is a founder and CEO of Snow Monkey Ice Cream and is a graduate of Boston University's School of Hospitality Administration. Rachel started her first business in the entertainment industry at age 16 when living in Hong Kong, so it's no surprise that she launched her business in the Buzz Lab as a student at BU. She created Snow Monkey in her college apartment. I called it ice cream, but really, Rachel reinvented ice cream with her dairy-free dessert that is vegan, paleo, and made from only superfoods, fruit, and seeds. Snow Monkey was recognized as an innovation in the dessert category, securing a spot in the prestigious Chobani Food Incubator. And in just 2 years, she expanded distribution from 0 to 1,200 retail locations, earning her a spot on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list in 2019. Her product is now stocked in more than 2,500 stores, including Whole Foods, Wegmans, Kroger, and more. I am now pleased to introduce our moderator, Siobhán O'Mahony. She is the Feld Family Professor in Innovation and Entrepreneurship at the BU Questrom School of Business, and also serves as the Academic Director of Research and Curriculum for Innovate at BU, a campus-wide initiative to spur innovation across the university. Thank you all for joining us today. Siobhán, I would like to now turn the floor over to you. So if everyone could turn on your cameras and your microphones, we'll be ready to roll. Thank you.
Thank you for that nice introduction, Marianne. Great to have so many people from all over the world with us today. We're all just coming out of COVID and starting to see the light and imagining what the new normal will be. And I wanted to get started just asking the founders and leaders that are with us here today, How has the past year changed your business? What adaptations have you made? How has your focus and attention changed? And let's start with Rachel.
Oh my God. I mean, what hasn't changed, right? I mean, the world kind of went into a 180. And I think luckily with the nature of startups, you have to always learn how to pivot anyways. So thankfully it was a little bit of second nature, having to kind of roll with the punches and pivot, but I can't say it was easy at all. I think really the biggest change that we've seen is going virtual, which for a food company is really hard, especially when you do a lot of field marketing. You know, we're in the stores doing demos or showing up at Equinox, at Lululemon, sharing the product, because taste and getting people to have the first bite is really how you can effectively gain a customer. So that was very, very tough. And also like not being able to walk into the store and make sure that the pints were perfectly set. You know, our sales director was like at home, probably like shaking her door, trying to get out. That was very, very tough. And then on top of that, not being able to go to the manufacturer and taste batches. So we've really had to figure out how to communicate differently. And I would say and in much more detail about things that usually are done in person and are very hands-on. And then I'm sure we'll touch upon this later, but also the supply chain factors that we were definitely experiencing. I know Kevin mentioned this something similar on our previous discussion. Supply chain has been very, very tough to manage.
Kevin, take it away.
Well, for us, I mean, we're really a data analytics company. So in some ways, it really hasn't affected us in any way that's terrible, right? I think this pandemic has hit, I think it depends what kind of company you are, right? Some companies like Rachel's really suffered. And honestly, I wouldn't mind being in the home exercise equipment business right now. And some of this is by no fault of a startup's own, it's just sheer luck, right? And so we're kind of on the spectrum of it hasn't affected us much. We haven't gone to as many of our clients, but that hasn't been terrible. We've probably learned that we don't need to go to our clients as much as we thought we did, which is reducing how much money we spend on our sales and marketing team traveling around. And we were at this crux of deciding whether we're going to be a company that works in Boston and has an office here, or if we work virtually and have our team get together when we need to, and how do we manage that? And that's been probably the biggest driver right now. We're a small company. We're 6 internal employees and another dozen consultants. We're going to be a dozen people by the end of the year, and we're making real decisions about, can we hire somebody from Denver and let them stay in Denver? And so it's been good in that way. So we have access to more talent, and we're not going to have headquarters here. We are, but we're not going to require people to move here. So it's, in some ways it's been good for us, and others it certainly hasn't been ideal, but we've been creative about that. So it's been good.
Sabrina, you've been studying leaders handling crisis for the last quarter century. What are some of the strategies and practices that help leaders manage the current crisis and plan for the next?
Right. Well, I get asked that question a lot. I think the worst time to plan for a crisis is when you're in one. And so, what you really want to do is, in a way, like imagine the unimaginable, which for everybody happened in the last year, and put together contingency plans on how you can feasibly continue to operate your business. So, there's lots of templates to do that, but basically a straw man plan includes thinking about those scenarios, doing a vulnerability assessment, and then figuring out that, the ripple effect of how that scenario can destroy your entire organization, from your supply chain to your customer, where your customers get your products and so forth. And then come up with different contingency plans. So there's a plan, but then there's a backup to that plan. And I think a lot of us have been living in limbo, like coming up with one plan and then it changes the following week, and then another plan which changes the week after that. And unfortunately, that's actually a requirement to surviving in business right now, is all of these contingency plans. And then I think, my advice always to leaders is be able to answer the worst questions you never want to have to answer, and have the honest answers for those, and communicate often and frequently, because when when you're in crisis mode, employees and customers need to hear more from leadership, to just, believe in something.
Believe in something. Rachel, your team is, I think, tri-coastal from Hawaii, did you say California and Florida? How has your team kind of banded together to experiment, given that you couldn't merchandise the way you used to, you couldn't market, you couldn't taste your product, you couldn't sell it? What kind of innovations did you come up with that you're going to keep, and what kind of adaptations did you make you're going to say goodbye to?
Well, luckily we're a millennial company, so kind of switching to a digital strategy was luckily second nature to us. I think that we really had to depend on getting a lot smarter with our targeted advertisements, our Google ads. And also we're lucky to be partnered with 6 female Olympians and professional athletes, and getting really creative with the way that we cut different segments of a lot of their campaigns and production days, the way that we've repurposed assets that, we thought we'd get to shoot with them like every 6 months, and all of a sudden it's like a year and a half, and we're like, does anyone have a photo we haven't used of so-and-so, right? And really getting our hands dirty with the analytics behind who's watching our ads, like where are they cutting off? What is that path to purchase? What's making them click? What are the sales that are performing the best, and then repeating them? So that's been something that we wouldn't have probably taken the time to really dive into if we had been super busy in the field, because the field is where we really saw like the biggest jump in exposure before. But luckily we didn't start during the pandemic year. We had already had a base of distribution and a loyal customer base. So at one point we would have had to transition to more of a digital strategy anyways. Would it have been this accelerated? Probably not, but it kind of pushed us to where we need to be anyways. So we're just trying to fine tune that new formula, I would say. And how our team is really banded together. I mean, Sabrina really hit the nail on the head with communicating clearly, effectively. And I think like almost over communicating, I found has been so essential, because sometimes, once you're on the end of a 2-hour Zoom meeting, like people are a little bit tapped out, right? And just really like summarizing and bringing people in together and over communicating has been so helpful. And having those Monday weekly check-ins, and then our Friday win meeting was the one that we added in times of COVID, and we've actually kept. I really like that Friday win, because by Friday, everyone's like, oh my God, I don't know how it's Friday. We got so much done. And giving them like that 10 minutes each person to celebrate something they're really proud of that they've accomplished, even though things overall are not amazing, I think is really helpful to boost morale.
That's great. Friday win meeting. Okay, let's all adopt that. Kevin, what adaptations have you made that you're going to say goodbye to? What adaptations have you made that you're going to keep doing?
Yeah, so I think aside from the way we're approaching the people strategy within the organization, we've changed. We've changed a lot of the approach to. We had pictured our business being very much B2B, and then transitioning into having exposure to the consumer. That changed pretty dramatically because people stopped going to the grocery store. So we weren't selling traceability to Whole Foods. We're selling it directly to consumers who are buying from online e-commerce and protein sellers. So people are buying meats online. So all of a sudden we had our label exposed to consumers way sooner than we thought we would. So that was kind of one of the big changes that we hadn't expected, which was really a positive. It also changed. It's going to change how we raise our next round. We're going for a Series A in the end of the year, and we'll have a very different story, because now we not only have a B2B, but we also have a B2C story that we thought was going to be later in our conversation. So we have things like that have happened that are really, really pretty positive. I think in general that, we've learned a lot too about, our sales team and how we function, which I think we would have anyway, but it's been very different. And Rachel mentioned analytics and things like that. We have a very much a nerdy group that lives off of that type of stuff. So, but it's been I think we're seeing a different picture as a result. And we're also thinking about what we offer differently, which is kind of pretty dramatic. Would that have happened without this pandemic? I don't know, but in general, yeah, we've changed our sales and marketing strategy. We've changed the way we talk about what we do. And a lot of that is because we got exposure to consumers, which was really kind of a compelling story for us. So it was good.
Wow. So I just want to go back to clarify, how have you changed your product and service offering?
So and this, it's so true for so many startups, right? If you look at all the pitches you do over time when you're fundraising, and it's kind of like the story of telephone with little kids. One kid tells the next kid, and the story is completely different by the end. And when we were raising a small convertible note versus our seed round versus the next convertible note versus what we're going to tell is the story. We talked about ourselves as data analytics, then we were a software company, now we're a data analytics company. So we're really, so part of that is really around just the landscape and what we see, and then also understanding a little better the drivers for our customers have changed. And they, some of it's, grocery stores, and they're pretty traumatized and they're trying to come back. It's going to be a different normal for them. So that's part of what we need to understand is what's driving them. And so we have things like that. We have to change the way we articulate those things. And then actually we also have this there's some regulatory stuff that has come through in both this administration, the past one on the food side, that will affect us. And some of it's very pandemic driven. So we also had that input that's also changed and forced us to adapt to how we present ourselves. So it's kind of ongoing, morphing story, but every time you think, you're like, this is definitely what we are. And I swear it is this time.
I love this quote in Sabrina's book. The mission is what you're doing. The mission's about being what you are today. The vision is about what you're becoming, kind of in a Michelle Obama way. So are you describing a change in both? And Sabrina, how do you make the decision? Because I think I hear people abuse those terms unmercifully quite often.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't come up with a mission statement, that is identifiable with what your company actually does, just don't even bother. I've seen so many vapid mission statements and vision statements. I mean, so the mission statement is sort of what you're doing now, what you are, and a vision statement is very aspirational and what how you want to change the world. And what I find often with young companies is that they think that that's it, that's our culture, we're just going to put that up over the wall and everybody go to work, and why shouldn't you be inspired? And the problem is that that actually is couldn't be the worst that's the worst thing you could do. And so the FedEx guy just arrived and the dogs are going to start to bark. You might want to direct this next question to someone else.
Well, I think there's a really interesting point here. Kevin's talking about the plan is always changing, who we are, what we do. This is changing, daily, weekly, I'm not sure. So then the real question is, how do you create slack so that your external audiences stay with you as you make these changes? And I think, Rachel, this applies to you as you change your merchandising and your sales. How do you maintain authenticity, which is what Sabrina talks about, coherence and integrity, while you're tacking left, tacking right?
Cool. Luckily, my dog stopped barking because he started responding to Sabrina's. I was like, someone give this question to Kevin. But honestly, I think in a time like this, especially, all you can do is really be authentic and be honest with your customers. Especially when the vaccine was being sent out, there was a huge dry ice shortage, and our e-commerce sales skyrocketed during COVID, but of course it's dependent on dry ice. So all of a sudden people were like, okay, so I can't go in store, and now you have a 2-week lead time when usually you ship, 2-day overnight. And just being honest and over communicative, we sent out a notice saying hey, if you want to order Snow Monkey, just letting you know, there's going to be X amount of lead time, and we're just rolling with the punches, just like everyone else is. And, we're doing our best. And same thing when we were out of stock, it's just, I think it also creates less stress for the team. You don't have to make anything up. It's just, it really comes down to that human level. And luckily, like from the very beginning for us, when it came to social media and PR, we just said we were going to
I think we lost Rachel. Everybody else there?
Yep, we're here.
Okay.
I can pick back up before
I
we
was on the
were.
edge of my seat. Well, she'll come back in. Go ahead, Sabrina.
Yes, sorry about that interruption. Yeah, so we were talking about mission and vision, and what it comes down to is establishing a core value set for your company and what you believe in and what you stand for. The second thing is articulating those values, of course, but also then aligning your values with your vision of how you want to change the world and what that means to your employees, like literally asking them how they feel about that. And then the third piece then, which is kind of part of the go-to-market strategy, is what's the value proposition. And I would dare say that, it's important to ask customers now, depending on what kind of business you are, like, do they still want the same products that you offered before the pandemic? And do they still want to be marketed to in the same way? Do they still want the same messages, right? Because a lot of people are not responding to fear-based marketing. They're responding more to sort of messages of inclusion and belonging. And all of that is a big messy ball, but it's critical to get back to basics now and look at those core values and your vision and your value proposition and make sure they're still in alignment.
Kevin, I saw you nodding there. How do you make sure they're in alignment when you're thinking about changing and adapting at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? We're constantly asking our what's driving our customers, what resonates, and how do we articulate that in a simple way? We have a complicated message to get across, explaining what we do and how we do it and what value it provides, and so we're constantly in that mode. I think what we have found is, and it's kind of interesting. Anecdotally, we went to one new processor. Our processors are who our direct customers are, who pay for our service, and we presented our pricing model only to be pushed back really hard for a different type of pricing model entirely. And we didn't get that the pricing model, of course, is part of what's like, it needs to match what's driving our customer, right? And we were wrong. And so just figuring out those things, some of it is, is being flexible. And, when you have the new product and the first time you get in front of a customer and you're, and they ask like, how much does it cost? And you don't want to answer because you don't want to seem like the crazy guy in the room who's going to offer something way too much or not enough. And so, all of those things are a learning process that you just try to get as efficient with them as possible, as quickly as you can. Some of the things, quite frankly, we go to smaller customers first that are, we have a lot of large clients and that are processors, and that's been intentional, but we started with some that were less critical and that we knew well. So we could go to them, and if they said we're crazy and laughed us out the door, it's not the worst thing, but it was a good starting point. We didn't want to start with, the home run to Walmart. We wanted to,
Right.
So that's the, some of that strategy lives within what we're doing, because we're doing something new. We don't know exactly how it's going to be received. We've done our homework. We think we know. We have people from the industry. So we cover as many bases as we can, control as much as we can, and then everything else is just being very deliberate and strategic about how we kind of start in the shallow end and work our way to the deep end. So.
Yeah, it gives you some leeway to experiment and fail a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
And Sabrina talks about failure. But Rachel, we lost you. I think we were at the end of your dry ice story, and trying to explain, like, how did your team get comfortable with, like, we can't ship our product because we don't have dry ice because it's being used for vaccines to save people's lives. Did you lose customers? I mean, did they come back to you? Were they patient? Did they wait?
I mean, most people are very patient, very understanding. There's a few people who just really want their ice cream to get them through this hard time. And I get it. But I mean, for the most part, I mean, everyone's really banded together, right? And I think the one thing that when we started out, and I remember because, you know, I started in my Boston University apartment my senior year, and my best friend was in comm. So she took over all the social media and she's now our CMO. But from the very beginning, she was like, we're never going to pay anyone to take over our social media, to write our copy and to do our PR, because the one thing we really have is our brand voice, and we keep it so authentic. And that's what we're going to do. No matter how big we get, we are going to write and approve everything that goes out publicly. And that's never changed. And I think that made navigating this very like turbulent time, frankly, a lot easier. It's not stressful when you're just being honest and you have that rapport with your customers.
Sabrina, you talked a lot about brand in your book. Do you want to elaborate on the key to authenticity here?
Yeah, I mean, like, so creating an authentic brand is an incredible effort and exercise. It takes a long time, but keeping it authentic is even more difficult because your brand has to evolve with a reality that's changing around you. And, you know, I think, like I've said it before, but like it all comes down to your values and what matters to you as a founder and or as a chief executive of your company. And then really thinking about how those values, what they actually look like in practice, in your business practices, in HR, in how people talk to each other, in the quality of the products you manufacture, and how you relate and talk to your customers and listen to their complaints rather than ignoring them. Like, right, every single value has to infuse your business processes and therefore will infuse your culture, right? And then those values like protect you from faking it, and they protect your company from going astray, and hold you sort of in place from doing things that aren't authentic to your brand. So I really think that's the core, but essentially everything kind of starts there and then radiates out through your business to create your brand.
So Rachel, for you, we're not outsourcing our copy. We're not outsourcing social media. That's got to come from here. It's got to come from us. Kevin, what do you do? I mean, you know, and I think you referenced earlier that your business model is a lot more complicated. You're saying, I'm trying to provide transparency about where your fish comes from. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I could just say that, or I can boil down how we do it.
Yeah, no, and I think this permeates through every startup I've ever been part of. I feel very strongly that I want to be part of startups that have a mission component that's at the core of what they do. So the product or service provides a benefit, you know, is environmentally or socially responsible, makes the world a better place, and live that mantra within the organization. So it's very much as Sabrina has just described. I think, I don't know if we do it well, but that's what we aim to do. So in the case of what we're doing now, right, we really are focused on, if we are successful, there's this transparency within the supply chain that we create, which then enables and strengthens everybody who is raising shrimp in Vietnam environmentally and socially responsibly, right? Or is a local fisherman who's catching product in a local and in a way that, you know, is valued. So to us, the local economy aspect and those aspects of it are very important to us. So we have strong engagement with those that we think this will benefit, right? So the harvesters, they're not our paying customers by any means, but it's a connection that we have. And we also, everything else around the decisions we make, including what investors we have, right? Like that's a important thing. And so we are very interested. We're raising our Series A at some point, probably later this year. And we are already having conversations with potential investors, right? It's kind of a typical thing to do. And we are very intentional about who we're talking to. We're interested in specific groups. We probably have a dozen that we're talking to that could be potential leads that all understand where we are and that we won't compromise our mission to we will, if we are successful, we will do really well. We don't need to turn this into something that we don't feel good about. And so that's where the foundation of where we are. So whether it's investors, team, marketing, whatever it is, we kind of live that in all those spaces.
Rachel, are you having the same kind of conversations? I know your penetration into markets like Whole Foods and Wegmans, personal favorites of mine, has really been very fast, very high growth.
Luckily, it was high growth, but with that high growth, you also have to make sure they're quality doors, right? And maintaining that quality over quantity. So I'm glad that we were able to maintain both of them. But we're very transparent about it. We have everything up on our website. We also work with our co-packer to make sure that every item that we ever bring in when we're producing new flavors, or if we switch suppliers, that everything is vetted. And we get, actually, because we're the most allergy friendly ice cream alternative on the market, we actually have a lot of people who call us with special questions to know about the factory, about the sources. We even send people the spec sheets if they ask for it, because I created this because of, yes, being an athlete who wanted to indulge in ice cream, but because of all the food allergies and intolerances that I have. So I understand the stress that goes behind not really knowing like what might be going in your food or how careful it's being handled. So we're very happy to share that. If that starts happening on a much higher volume, it's probably going to take up a lot of time, but I think it's really an integral part of customer service. But because of that, that's why we don't have much flexibility in our supply chain. So, when things just went out of stock or items couldn't be delivered or boats were just waiting to get a dock on port during COVID and we were out of ingredients, we just could not produce, because we're never going to be like, oh, screw it, just throw something else in there, right?
You can't do that. Yeah, right. No. Okay. So that's very much tied to your mission, is the integrity and quality of the product itself.
Absolutely.
So that constrains sort of your options available to you in times of crisis. Sabrina said earlier that it's hard to plan for a crisis when you're in the middle of it. And we'd like to think that's not the case anymore, but our planning muscles are weakened. So approach to planning change now. How are you developing new planning muscles? I'll throw that out to whoever wants to talk.
I'll take it to start off. Yeah, it's so true. Like during COVID, there wasn't really anything to plan for really long term, right? We were all kind of like living like week to week, and reality kept changing. It felt like a moving target. I think now we can start to begin to do more mid-range and longer term planning. But I think we're still living in a very short-term world. Like for different types of companies in different parts of the world, getting to tomorrow or next week is still something we have to think about. And so I think contingency planning for the short term is still super critical. And then just putting together straw man plans, like for Q3 and Q4, right? You'll probably change them, but it feels good to know that you've thought about it. And so when you're doing planning, like I would offer like 3 questions. When I was running my company, I always asked myself, like, okay, first of all, why am I doing this? Like, people want this, they want that, but like, why? Why are we doing this? And then secondly, what does success look like? Like, so, if we get to next quarter, what does next quarter look like? And will I be proud of that? Is that an accomplishment? And then the third piece, of planning is what's missing, right? So you see everything that's in front of you, but what could go wrong? And if something goes wrong, how are you going to recover? So those would be the 3 questions I would always ask.
Those are really good questions. Rachel and Kevin, do you want to jump in on your planning muscles?
I think we actually have a very funny dynamic in our group, because it was, for a while it was 5 of us, and we'd have different times for different meetings. It was all the same group of people. We're just, it's such a funny dynamic, because we'd have a strategy call and one to assess our performance metrics. And so it's kind of the same team always getting back together and just kind of like, here we are again. But the, forcing us to kind of segment what we're doing and not just get on a call and have a conversation and derail it, but be very deliberate about what we were doing. It kind of forced us to be in that mode a little more than I think we would have. But we really, we've changed the way. I mean, we certainly are looking at all aspects, right, from the risk component for us. And so that might be financial or, sales and how things are rolling out there, or it might be even as simple as trying to find the right people for our team, which is actually one of the hardest problems we're having right now is getting developers, for example. So we definitely, I would say earlier in the process than I have in the past with startups, we were very structured about thinking about all of these things in a way that was more deliberate and more planned and more organized, even though every meeting was the same for other people. But I think it was very healthy, and it was what we needed, and it's stuck now. And we have regular, we do assess risk more frequently. And strategy conversations about new information we have, and we're much more organized, right? Because we're working remotely too. So it's good in that regard.
Less travel time, more thinking time.
That's right.
I mean, Rachel, I'm thinking too, like, how do you develop more choices and options? Like you're very focused on what you're doing with plant-based, vegan, frozen dessert. So how do you create more choices when your mission itself constrains the options you have? On this question of risk assessment, I think this is a tricky one.
Well, our broad mission is actually to reinvent staple favorites as delicious fuel for a healthy life. So we started with ice cream, very hyper focused on ice cream because we're not number one in our category yet, and I don't want to deviate or cannibalize. But once we've achieved that, then I think it's really exciting that we can actually go into other staple favorites and start reinventing those as well. And there are so many times where I'm just like, I'm ready to launch something. I want to launch something else, and I have to just kind of like say no. And it's funny because over the last year and a half, I've kind of experienced something similar to Kevin, because we're a small team and our executive team is super small. So anytime we have a strategy about any kind of department, it's the same 3 people getting together. And I think how we've also kept it fresh is just making sure that we bring in our advisors, our investors, anytime might be something that leans into one of their specialties or their experience, to then use them. So it's almost bringing in a new perspective, because we're so deep in the weeds that sometimes it is really hard to see kind of the macro view of everything that we're doing.
This is a good one for Sabrina, because you've seen companies that start this small, where Kevin and Rachel are, they're under 10 people, and they're having to say, what is this meeting about? Let's focus, because it's the same people showing up. And you talk in your book about the importance of external advisors, and that's easy to say, but how do you, there's a question of when to bring them in, how to bring them in, how much to share, and whether there's conflicting advice or different ideas, then what do you do? So those are real issues with making external advice usable. What do you recommend, Sabrina?
Yeah, I mean, I think that first of all, it can be very lonely at the top, particularly in turbulent times and in crisis, and you need people that you can talk to and that you can spill your guts to. And these are people who have been in your shoes and they want to see you succeed. And these are the people, mentors, as we call them, advisors, right? But they're not necessarily on your board or on your advisory board. It's a personal network that you've put together of people who will tell you what you need to hear and not what you want to hear. And they'll tell you when you're, way out over your skis on something, or is just someone you can call to say hey, I need to bounce this idea off of you. Something doesn't sit right with me. And you need those people because your board is there for one reason, your advisory group is there for another, but you need that network for yourself. And constructing that will change over time, right? Given the size of your business. I had at any given time between 4 and 5 people that I could talk to that represented the different functions of my business, whether it was client service or talking with journalists, or dealing with employee issues, or financial issues. And I'll tell you, I can't stress it enough. You know, those people, like 10 minutes with them is like food for the soul.
I'd love to ask the audience questions. Put your questions in the Q&A. I have one to work with here. And this is a good question about culture. I love to ask CEOs what they invest, give up to make their culture real. So this is maybe going back to Sabrina was saying, you have a sign, put it on the wall. But in practice, what does that mean? He relates that Jim Cook of Sam Adams invested his ego, asked every new hire to say, F you, Jim, on their first day, so that they knew that there was no fear of speaking up at his company. That's an extreme example. Are there extreme examples that both of you are on the cusp of growing and enlarging your team? Like, how are you, and I think Sabrina said earlier, creating the culture is one thing, maintaining it is another. How do you make sure that the new people who come in are going to speak freely, and that you still have that generative, problem-solving, purposeful culture that you talked about earlier?
Is that you asking me that, or Kevin or Rachel?
I'm throwing it out to whoever wants to go first. This came from Peter Kirkwood. Thank you, Peter.
I would say, so I think this is an interesting question. And, we just talked about how we're such small teams, and early for us, I think it's important I think nobody really has a sense of where a business is headed. And everyone has very different perspectives. And so, the idea of a team that can make decisions together and feel comfortable and have a level of comfort that you're participating and being part of the input is important, because if you lean on one person to make all these decisions, you're going to be in trouble. And advisors play a big role in that, and the board plays a big role in that. And I think there's more to it than, as you grow, though, you have to be careful, right? You don't want it to be the core 4 people. And so you need to make sure you're deliberate about getting each group to kind of then take that culture and take it to the different groups of the organization, right? You have a sales team. They need to have that same sense of autonomy, or at least the ability to be strategic in their conversations, right? The beauty of a startup is you get to make strategic decisions all the time. I love that, right? It's sometimes stressful, but it's really fun. That's the best part about this. And to enable a sales team, for example, to do the same thing to a level. Now, that's not to say everyone's going to make the decision, but having that input, I think that creates the culture, and you have to let it permeate that way. I also think it's really important to, and I'm coming from a world that the seafood industry is terrible for this, but the seafood industry is all white men, and they're all old, and diversity is terribly lacking. And so our ability to diversify our team as rapidly as we can is really important to our success, right? And so that's also, we're very aware of that, and we're trying to, drive that. At the same time, we're trying to run 100 miles an hour and get everybody in the right place. So I think, those things make you very successful. You just have to, I think you have to be deliberate about them, even though it's hard to think about them while you're trying to, start a business. So, but it is important.
There's a real tension between empowering people and making decisions that are consistent with your purpose, mission, and vision.
Absolutely.
Rachel, how are you dealing with this dilemma?
I actually really like this question as well, because I think culture is really important to us at Snow Monkey. And I think 2 ways that I really see people put their money where their mouth is we don't really have much of a hierarchy. It is a very kind of flat structure, to the point where the executives are always rolling up their sleeves. Like, I've been there with our CMO at 5 a.m. waiting for U-Haul to open to get the van to drive it to the office to then load everything for an expo. That's not something we're like, oh, the juniors and interns can do it. We've all gone to in-store demos and actually run demos with interns, with new hires. We're happy to roll up our sleeves. And while, it may be inefficient in that one instance, I think overall it really builds a lot of productivity, because it really shows that like team culture. And there's just been times where I've seen my team come together just like that. Like we got a 2-week heads up that we had to do an athlete shoot for over Memorial Day weekend. And I was like, guys, I know it's a holiday weekend. If you're not free, that's fine. Like we will figure it out with production crew. Everyone was like, no, I want to be there. I changed my plans. Like you can't pay people to do that. And that's the kind of culture that we've built where everyone just like wants any opportunity to get the band back together and see each other and create something. And I think the other thing is really empowerment. And that sometimes as a CEO is very scary to say like, all right, you know, our sales director has got it and she's going to handle it. And I'm not involved in those conversations. And we just know that if something comes up and there's a mistake that's being made, we don't have any kind of like beat down culture. It's like, ring us up. How can we help? Let's troubleshoot this together and we move on. And I think that's a really healthy way to learn because we do not have all the answers, right? There's no formula for what we're doing. So we're all really just trying our best, making like 1,000 strategic decisions a day, as Kevin was saying, which is just fun, but my God, it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, you grow fast when you make all these strategic decisions every day. I got a question from Grace M. How do you find good candidates that align with your mission, especially in a tough labor market? How do you separate the talkers from the doers? And Sabrina, you talk about your radar for, I think you call it a BS meter in your book.
Yeah.
So I'll open it to whoever wants to go first.
I mean, I don't know. I've interviewed, I mean, you guys have all interviewed people and I've made some really bad hires, like really bad hires. And you have to first sort of find out, of course, if they have the same value system as you do, and if they identify with like your mission, but like, is working at your company, like something that's like that they really think is like so key to their own career development. And like, also, I always ask this question and people look at me funny. I say like, how do you resolve conflict? And it tells you interesting things about, you know, whether you're hiring a leader, a manager, or your receptionist, about how they communicate. And it brings up examples of how they have done it. And you quickly can weed out, you know, people who don't have that skill set or have done it the wrong way. But, you know, I mean, there's so many ways to interview people, but I mean, that's where I would start.
Yeah, I think we're in a similar mode, and it's actually funny you mentioned that, Sabrina, because we interview situationally, right? Like, have you ever had a situation where this has happened and how did you handle it, right? Because you never want to ask somebody how would they handle something, because that never helps. But it really does. It's a good way to highlight, and those questions, no matter what the role is, what you just listed off. We're interviewing for 3 different roles right now, and those are some of the core questions that we have for everybody to answer. And then the other part of that, on like the mission side, for us, and I bet Rachel's probably in a similar boat, is we actually get a lot more applicants because of the type of business we are. And so people, I mean, young people really want to be in a place where they're having an impact. And I think it just opens us up to opportunities that are really, you know, we get a lot more people interested, and you can tell from their backgrounds or what they've done that there's something driving them in that side of things. So that's super compelling for us, and it actually is a huge benefit. So.
The only thing I would add there, because I think Sabrina and Kevin really hit the nail on the head with specific questions to ask in situational kind of context, is we also just make sure we hire for culture, because someone could have the skills, but if they don't have the culture and they don't vibe with the team, it's going to be poison in the organization. And so I make it a point to go work out with someone, or we all go to like our favorite like lunch cafe and just hang out. Like, can you have a beer with that person? Can you go on a hike with that person? Because if not, like, you sure as hell are not going to want to sit in the office with them day in, day out, like fighting fires, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Can I add one comment to all this? You know, we've talked a lot about like what to do, but the thing is, like, if it's not authentic, don't bother. Like, you can't put, what's that saying? You can't put lipstick on a pig. And there's so many examples of companies where employees have defected, like Basecamp, because they were talking about things and the CEO said, I don't want you talking about that. And, you know, if you don't like that, here's 6 months severance. And so a lot of people walked out, like, and then he apologized later. So like, it has to be authentic, right? You have to decide who you are and what you stand for, and then infuse your business practices with that. You can't reverse engineer it, at least not too easily. That's a whole other panel discussion, but you know, you just can't fake it, because people will sniff you out, and then you'll really set yourself back.
Sabrina, you talk about something, not faking it, but acting as if in your book. Can you explain that? So we don't want to fake it till we make it. We want to make it. But what is this as if?
Acting as if, yeah, sure. I mean, acting as if is not faking it. Acting as if is actually a technique that was created by a psychologist in the 1920s. And it's used now in cognitive behavioral therapy to help people with an inferiority complex or insecurities, right? To pretend that they have those qualities of confidence, and to try and act like they're confident, so that over time and repetitive action, then they actually feel like, oh, I can be like this, and so I'm going to become it. And it is, you know, it builds confidence, just like power posing, which a woman named Amy Cuddy came up with. Which is just that, you know, you stand tall with your arms out and you look more confident. So therefore, maybe it's self-help. And just like, you know, if you dress for success, you wear black or you wear red to feel more confident. Those are all, you know, very viable ways of trying to build your own confidence. And there's nothing wrong with that, because you're not doing it at anyone else's expense. When you do it at someone else's expense for personal gain, that's when you slide into faking it and exaggerating the truth and lying and all that.
At someone else's expense. We have another question from Grace that's on this topic. How do you get through tough days as a founder? Both Kevin and Rachel talked about some tough days. And the sub part of the question is, do you have mentors who are experienced founders? This ties back to our need for outside advisors and people to help talk to.
Go ahead, Rachel.
I think the dry ice that's a tough day.
It is. Hey, we don't take priority to the vaccine. I will always bow down to that. But I think self-care is really, really important. And I learned that the hard way. I hit burnout pretty bad, I think, like our third year, because I was just so fixated on just hitting our goals, but also there are no benchmarks sometimes when you're creating something or you don't have a company to peg against. So you don't really know like what truly success is, or if you should be proud of something you've accomplished, because you have no metric to be like, hey, we actually did a damn good job. And so especially when you're like a small team and you wear so many hats, I think like there's a lot of dilemma between, all right, if I go out, you know, on a Friday night and I'm not so productive on Saturday, well, then there's like a huge ripple effect. And I think that taking that like negative self-talk out is really important, and just doing what you love, because I've realized that when I'm my best self, I can then serve my team, my customers, my investors, and my business really, really well. And I'm a direct reflection of how the company culture is going to grow. And so is everyone on my team. And so sometimes if I have a tough day, you know, I'm like, you know what, I'm going surfing. And it's not going to fix the problem, but I'm going to be in a much better shape to fight that head on the next day or whenever. And I really preach that for my team as well. We actually start an hour later than most businesses so that everyone can get their morning workout in. And that way they come to work, they're happy. Wow, I know I'm not my best self unless I've worked out. So I want everyone to be able to do what they do. Maybe they sleep in, whatever they need, right?
Yeah. I'm coming to work. Working out, I'm there, I'm in. We're at 5 minutes. The last couple minutes, if you have advice for other founders out there that are dealing with maybe issues like yours, maybe different issues, what What piece of advice? Rachel got us started with self-care. That's a good one at the top.
I would say surround yourself with people who can support you, but not just people who are successful. I think there's you probably learn more from people who have failed than people who are successful, because a lot of times there's luck involved that you don't realize when you're successful. But when you have a business and something has failed, you know why it failed. And I think there's value in having people who've experienced both. And it enables you to learn things that others learned directly. And if you can find people like that that can help you and support you, I think they're tremendously valuable. So yes, it is good. It is great to have people who are successful be your mentors and advisors, but also talk to people who have, here's where I failed in the regulatory side of this type of business you're doing. And this is the things I wouldn't do, right? That is hugely valuable.
That is hugely valuable.
And I think that's a really important part that I think people miss sometimes. And to me, I value it a lot.
Yeah.
So saves you from making those same mistakes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sabrina.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I would say just know what you don't know, and always ask yourself what's missing from this picture, so that your next move is, the most informed and the most together that it can possibly be. And it causes you to think about what's missing all the time. And I know I've said that, but it really, really helps to see what could possibly go wrong with this, so that you're always somewhere in the middle and in equilibrium. And the last thing is I'll say is that it keeps you pretty humble and makes you leave your ego at the door, which is critical for any founder's success.
And I'll add one thing I took away from Sabrina's book, which is available on Audible and available for pre-order on Amazon. Make it, don't fake it. The thing I took from it, you don't have to have all the answers, but you do need to ask the hard questions. So that's a great example. Thank you, Marianne, for bringing this group together. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you, Kevin, Sabrina, Rachel, and Siobhán. It was a fantastic opportunity for our alumni audience to learn from your insights. I certainly enjoyed hearing about your authenticity, overcoming obstacles, and creating a positive and supportive business culture. I want to thank our audience for taking the time to log on today, listen, and ask great questions. We hope you learned a lot from the discussion as well. I want to thank especially the many donors out there who support the good work and valuable programs at the university. You are the ones that help make this institution a rich environment for our students, our faculty, alumni, and friends. And for that, we are truly grateful. We look forward to having you join us again in the future. So keep an eye on the BU alumni calendar for upcoming events and check back often, as things are added quite frequently. I'll send everyone who registered for the program a link to the recording and a link to Sabrina's book. And again, thank you all.
If you want to know where your fish comes from, go to Legit Fish. And if you want a plant-based dairy frozen dessert, go to Snow Monkey.
Outstanding. Take care, everyone. Thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.